For years, the obvious answer to One Piece's final villain question was Blackbeard. And it still makes sense. Blackbeard is Luffy's pirate opposite. He believes in dreams, but in the darkest possible way. He laughs like Luffy, chases freedom like Luffy, and wants the top of the pirate world like Luffy. But where Luffy's freedom lifts people up, Blackbeard's freedom crushes anyone in his way. So if One Piece ended with Luffy versus Blackbeard, nobody would be shocked. But then the story showed us Imu, the person sitting on the empty throne, the secret ruler above the world government. And suddenly the endgame changed. Because now the question is not just, who does Luffy fight last? The question is, what kind of ending is One Piece building toward? Is the ending about Luffy becoming Pirate King by defeating Blackbeard? Or is the ending about the world finally breaking free from Imu? I think the answer is both. Blackbeard may be the final pirate rival, but Imu feels like the final villain of the world, and that difference is the key. Before we go further, this is a theory video. Some parts are based on what the story has already shown, and some parts are connecting the dots. The first reason Imu feels like the final villain is simple. Imu is not introduced like a normal One Piece enemy. Most major villains control one place. Arlong has Kokoyasi Village. Crocodile manipulates Alabasta. Doflamingo controls Dressrosa. Kaido turns Wano into a prison. Luffy arrives, sees people who cannot live freely, finds the person crushing them, and breaks that person. But Imu is different. Imu is not the villain of one island. Imu is the villain behind the world those islands exist inside. That is why the empty throne reveal matters so much. The world government tells the world that no single king rules over everyone. The throne is supposed to be empty, because the nations are supposed to be equal. But Imu sitting there turns that symbol into a lie. The throne is not empty. The world is not balanced. The five elders are not really the top. And the entire political structure of the world is built around hiding one person. That is not just a villain reveal. That is a world reveal. It means the thing Luffy has been fighting island by island may have one hidden source above everything else. And that fits One Piece perfectly. Because One Piece has always been about freedom. Freedom to sail, to chase a dream, to know the truth, to laugh, and to exist without being erased because your history is inconvenient. Imu represents the opposite. Imu represents control so complete that the world does not even know who is controlling it. That is scarier than a tyrant everyone can see. Because Imu's power is hidden behind institutions, history books, propaganda, assassinations, erased islands, and the silence around the Void Century. That makes Imu a different kind of villain. Imu is not just using violence. Imu is deciding what reality is allowed to be. Who gets remembered? Who gets forgotten? Which names are dangerous? Which truths are illegal? Which lives can be deleted, without the world understanding why? That makes Imu the natural enemy of everything Luffy has become, especially after Gear 5. Luffy's awakened power is not framed like normal strength. It is framed as liberation, the drums of liberation, the sun god Nika, and a power tied to laughter, freedom, and people waiting for someone to break their chains. So once Luffy becomes the symbol the world government tried to erase, Imu stops being just a distant shadow. Imu becomes the person who has been trying to keep that symbol buried. That is the clearest reason Imu could be the final villain. Luffy is the return of a forbidden idea. Imu is the ruler who spent centuries making sure that idea never returned. But Blackbeard still matters. If Imu is the final villain of the world, Blackbeard is still the final pirate mirror. And that is why this debate is so interesting. Blackbeard has something Imu does not have. He is personal to Luffy's pirate journey. He is tied to Ace, the race for the One Piece, dreams, and the will of D. He wants the same impossible future Luffy wants, but he is willing to destroy anyone to get there. That makes Blackbeard a perfect final rival for Pirate King. But Imu is tied to something bigger than Pirate King. Imu is tied to why the Pirate King matters in the first place. Roger did not just find treasure. Roger found the truth. He reached Laugh-Tale, learned something about the Void Century, Joy Boy, the ancient world, and the future, and then the world started moving. That means the title of Pirate King is not only about beating other pirates. It is about reaching the one place the world government does not want anyone to reach. So the pirate race and the world revolution are connected. Blackbeard may be the final obstacle to Luffy reaching the truth. Imu may be the final enemy once that truth is revealed. That structure makes a lot of sense. First, Luffy proves he is the freest pirate. Then, the truth he uncovers forces the entire world into conflict with the ruler who buried it. Blackbeard could be the final rival before the dawn. Emu could be the final shadow, blocking the dawn. And One Piece loves layered villains like that. Crocodile is a villain, but Alabasta's civil war is the larger crisis. CP9 are enemies, but Enies lobby is really about the government's right to erase people. Doflamingo is the villain, but Dressrosa is a kingdom built on forgotten victims. One Piece likes villains who represent systems, and Emu is the biggest system villain the story has. That is why Emu does not need the same rivalry with Luffy that Blackbeard has. Emu's conflict with Luffy is thematic. Emu says the world belongs to the hidden ruler. Luffy says nobody gets to own the sea. Emu says history should be controlled. Luffy's journey keeps bringing forgotten history back into the light. Emu says dangerous names should disappear. Luffy carries the will of D, wears the straw hat, awakens Nika, and keeps becoming the thing the government cannot erase. That is a final villain setup. But there is one problem. Luffy usually does not fight villains because they are symbolically important. He fights them because they hurt his friends. So Emu still needs a personal bridge to Luffy. And the story already has a few. The first is Vivi. She is connected to Alabasta, the Poneglyph story, the Nefertari family, and the mystery around Queen Lily. She is also one of Luffy's closest allies outside the crew. If Emu's interest in Vivi becomes a direct threat, Luffy does not need a political lecture. He just needs to hear that Vivi is in danger. The second bridge is Sabo. Sabo saw too much. He became tied to the truth of the empty throne and the hidden ruler above the world. Because Sabo is Luffy's brother, anything involving him can make Emu's threat personal. The third bridge is Robin. Robin's dream is to learn the true history. If Emu is the person protecting the final lie, then Robin's dream eventually points straight at Emu. And Luffy always protects his crew's dreams. Luffy does not need to care about the Void Century like a scholar. He just has to understand that the truth Robin has chased her whole life is being blocked by someone hurting the world. Then it becomes simple. That person is in the way. So when people say, Luffy does not care about Emu, I think that is only true right now. Luffy did not care about Crocodile at first. He cared about Vivi. He did not care about Enies lobby as a political symbol at first. He cared about Robin. One Piece makes big systems personal through the people Luffy loves. Emu will become personal when Emu's control touches someone Luffy loves. Now, what about the final fight? This is where I think the ending could split. Blackbeard feels like the final pirate fight. The fight for Laugh Tale, dreams, and whether the One Piece becomes freedom for everyone or power for one man. But Emu feels like the final world fight. The fight after the truth is out, where the old world either survives or the dawn finally arrives. Blackbeard can be Luffy's darkest pirate mirror. Emu can be the final enemy of the dawn, and that might be the most One Piece answer possible. Because Luffy becoming Pirate King is probably not the final point of the story. It is the key that unlocks the final point. Whitebeard said that when the One Piece is found, the world will be shaken. That means finding the treasure is not just the ending, it is the trigger. And if the final war is about the truth of the world, then Emu has to be at the center of it, because Emu is the person most invested in the world staying exactly as it is. That is why I do think Emu is probably the final villain in the largest sense. Not necessarily the rival who tests Luffy's pirate dream the most. Not necessarily the enemy Luffy personally hates from the beginning. But the final obstacle to the world becoming free. The final face of the system Joy Boy failed to defeat. The final ruler sitting above a throne that was supposed to be empty. And the final proof that the world government was never just corrupt. It was built on a lie. And that is the scary part. With Blackbeard, we are waiting to see what he does next. With Emu, we are waiting to learn what was already done. Blackbeard is a future disaster. Emu is the disaster the world has been living inside for 800 years. So, is Emu actually the final villain? My answer is yes, but with one important twist. Emu is probably not replacing Blackbeard. Emu is above a different part of the story. Blackbeard challenges Luffy's dream. Emu challenges the dawn that dream is supposed to bring. Blackbeard is the man who could corrupt the meaning of Pirate King. Emu is the ruler who made the world need a Pirate King in the first place. And if One Piece ends the way it has been building for decades, Luffy may have to overcome both. First, the pirate who wants freedom only for himself. Then the ruler who denies freedom to everyone else. That is the real endgame. Not just Luffy becoming the freest person on the sea, but the world finally becoming free enough to hear the truth. So when Emu sits on the empty throne, it is not just a cool villain image. It is the story showing us the final contradiction. The world says no one rules it, but someone does. The world says the past is gone, but someone buried it. The world says Nika is a myth, but Luffy's heartbeat says otherwise. And when those lies finally collapse, Emu will not be able to stay a shadow anymore. The hidden ruler will have to step into the light. And that is when we will find out what kind of final villain One Piece has been hiding all along. So what do you think? Is Emu the true final villain? Or is Blackbeard still the one Luffy has to beat at the very end? Drop your answer in the comments, because this is one of those theories where both sides have real evidence. And honestly, that is what makes the final saga so exciting. The story is not just asking who is strongest, it is asking what has to fall before the dawn can finally rise.